Sports Consiglieres Podcast. My name is Jim Whalen, your host. With me is my co-host, Jerry Calla. We're on this 100th anniversary kick with the Giants. And our next
wait
guest.
a minute. I thought you were talking about my birthday.
Yeah, talking about your birthday. No, not yet.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I want to make sure.
We had three former Giants on, Perry Williams, Bill Orr, and Stephen Baker on the show. They all sung your praises as far as being instrumental in making their career better. And you also had three teams. You brought three teams to four different Super Bowls. So it's our pleasure to introduce Johnny Parker, strength and conditioning coach for the Giants, also with New England Patriots and San Francisco 49ers, and won a Super Bowl, two with the Giants and one with Tampa Bay. Johnny, thanks for being on the show. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank y'all for having me.
All right. So let's get credit. You grew up in Mississippi. How did you get involved in the weightlifting world? And how did that come about? As far as you getting involved in that world back in the 70s, because it was only really Joe Weider and Jack Lane back then, really, that kind of was really instrumental in weight training.
Well, when I was in the ninth grade, I was 5'11" and a half and weighed 105 pounds. And you could hang me on a clothesline and it wouldn't break. So there was a coach at our little school, Richard Hamberlin in Shaw, Mississippi. He had a set of weights in his backyard, and he let me and a few other guys come over there and lift weights. Now, I had to have help with the bar. That's how weak I was. And then Mom and Daddy got me a set of weights for Christmas. And, well, anyway, in high school, I gained about 75 pounds, or 80 or somewhere in there. And that was the only way that I was even a halfway decent high school player. And that's what I was, about halfway decent. And there wasn't a college program bad enough that would want me to play. So when I started teaching school after I graduated from Ole Miss, one of my assignments was to coach 7th and 8th grade girls basketball, and we won't go into that. I will say we lost our first game 51-9. So that's enough said about my coaching career in basketball. Anyway, but I've coached football, and I realized that some of those kids might have a chance to continue their career beyond high school if they got bigger and stronger. So we started lifting weights, and our players did get bigger and stronger, and we won a lot of games. And after our second state championship, I thought I'd done all I could do in high school, and I wanted to see if I could get college guys to work. And I thought that I better take one of these college jobs that I've been getting offered, or else they quit offering them. So I took a job at the University of South Carolina. And our head football coach, Paul Dixell, resigned after the second game. And but then after the season, he became athletic director at Indiana University and called me to come up there and be I was the first strength coach in the Big Ten. Well, then I worked, and you talk about just different personalities. My responsibilities were football and men's basketball. So that meant I worked with Lee Corso and Bob Knight.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Yeah, that is a little different. Coach Corso, you go into his office to talk, ask him about something. He'd be sitting behind his desk, and he wore a coat and tie every day. Well, he'd get up and start pacing the floor. He'd jump down in the floor and do 10 push-ups. He'd get up, walk around some more, do 10 sit-ups. I mean, it was hard to maintain eye contact with him now because he was all over the place. But he was very, very good to me. And I wouldn't say Bob was a sweetheart or anything, but to cut to the chase here, several years later, after I'd left in Indiana, Coach Parcells and Bob Knight were good friends, really good friends. And he just happened to mention in conversation that he was looking for a strength coach and hadn't found one that he liked. And Bob said, well, I'll tell you who you ought to go after. And he said, me. And so Coach Parcells called me and he interviewed me and he offered the job and I took it and we did pretty good. So that was how I got involved, in the NFL as a strength coach. And I'm still trying to get this thing. All right. Stay
There you
still.
go. There you go.
All right.
Jerry, want to jump in here?
Hey, John, just I want to say before I get into a few things with you, you look better than Billy Yard did on camera. So, that should mean anything. He was trying to play with the angles and, and everything. So he's bragging how good he looks. But anyway, so you come in '84 with Coach Parcells. And again, like Jimmy said earlier, Bill Lard, Perry Williams, Stephen Baker sang, your praises up and down.
Thank you.
What was the first thing that you tried to instill in the players when it came to strength and conditioning?
Well, back then, the players weren't required. Some places encouraged it, but nobody was really telling the players, "Hey, I want you to be here." So Leonard Marshall, who I'd had at LSU and became a real good defensive end for the Giants, I called him. I said, Leonard, now I don't know but one way to do this, and that's the hard way. I said, now these guys might run me back to Mississippi after the first day. But if I've got one person that'll do what I ask them to do, then maybe I can get another one. And then maybe he can get one. And then maybe they'll get a couple more. And we'll try to do it that way. And he said, Coach, I'll do anything you tell me to do. And it was that way for my 9 years with the Giants with Leonard. I owe him a great debt of gratitude.
And then I guess you're a proponent of free weights, but you also, I guess around the time, this gentleman, Mr. Goldstein, I guess he was from now Belarus, but he was from Russia. But
yes,
you were involved in the weight training, and then you actually ended up going to Russia. You're talking Iron Curtain, late 70s, early 80s, and then finding out what the Russians did. What did you find there? And then I guess Mr. Goldstein, I guess he defected to the United States and was on Staten Island. And lo and behold, he's trying to track him down. He's 10 miles from Giant Stadium, as you said in another interview. But like, what attracted you to Russia? And was there any problems getting in Russia at that time? And then what did you bring back? I know you're a proponent of free race rather than what's going on here. But just tell us a little bit about that. So you lost him.
Tablet. Okay. In Russia, we learned a lot about planning, but the Russians are so methodical that they wouldn't get past. I asked them a question and they wouldn't get past A or B. They never got to X, Y, and Z. Well, with Mr. Goldstein, he got to X, Y, and Z for us. And, but I think a big thing that I learned in Russia was about applying force and applying force rapidly. And it's all about how much force you can put into the ground. Well, that's true with sprinting. That's true with pass blocking. That's true with tackling. That's true with everything in football. Putting force into the ground and putting force into the ground rapidly. But first, you got to be able to produce a lot of force. I see you frowning.
No, I'm not frowning. No, I'm just taking it all in. So,
Mr. Goldstein, when we found him, I'd heard just that there was a Russian coach somewhere in North America, and I tried to find him, and then again, as you said, it turned out he was just 10 miles from Giant Stadium. So I started pestering him. I'd go over there a couple of times every week, and his stupid phone. Anyway, he would teach us, and then he started having weekend seminars. Rob Panarella, who's a good friend, a close friend of mine, not a good friend, he would come from Long Island to these seminars. And then Al Miller, who was the strength coach for the Broncos, he would fly in on weekends for these seminars. Mr. Goldstein, one weekend, he asked Al and myself to give him two of our, each of our programs. So I brought one on a Friday night, and then Al did. And then Saturday, he handed those programs back to us, and it looked like somebody spilled a bottle of ketchup on them. There was so much red in it. I mean, we were doing everything wrong, according to him. And so, anyway, we made a lot of progress thanks to him. And that's the basis of our book that we wrote a few years ago called The System. And just wanted to share that with American coaches, because unless it's people that Al and I told, I don't see very many people doing it. And what they're doing is outdated in a lot of cases. But anyway, it's not that I did anything good. It's just because of Mr. Goldstein that was able to, to be around some good teams and maybe help a little bit.
And then just like Russia, was there any problem getting into Russia at the time? I mean, really, Russia?
Not at all. But I was part of a Canadian group. There was a professor at, I believe it's McGill University, I think, in Montreal, who had connections in Russia and with the sports people. And we were there as guests of the sport committee. We stayed in the hotel that was built for the 1980 Olympics. We ate their best food, which was horrible. And I tell you, I don't care if I starve. I ain't eating borscht. That's beet soup. I ain't about to eat that. But anyway, the Russian people, I've been fortunate to visit a lot of countries, and the Russian people were probably the friendliest of any country I visited. But we would have.
Go ahead, Johnny. I'm sorry.
We were going to have we had daily seminars. It was called the Institute for Physical Culture and Sport. That's where their top coaches in all sports worked. And but they had sports schools all over the country. Now, just one little quick example. On a Saturday, our lectures were abbreviated, and we went to the Red Army Sports Club. That's the Army sponsored this sports club. And all they do are Olympic sports. That's all they train. Well, the gymnastics coach, who was Olga Corbett's coach back in the day, I don't know if y'all remember her or not, but he was giving us a tour of the gymnastics hall. And this was a Saturday morning now, and there must have been 150 kids in there and probably 50 coaches. And I saw some amazing things. And there were kids that did, I forget what, right in front of us. And I asked our guide, how old are they? And he said 8 years old and 6 years old.
Wow.
And I said, well, how much do they train? He said 6 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Wow.
And you think that's cruel and inhumane? You ain't been to Russia because they had nothing else to do.
Right.
I mean, if you save up enough money to buy a car, literally, at least back then, it'd be delivered in 10 years.
Really? Jeez.
Wow.
10 years. You had to pay up front, of course. But anyway, it was a blessing and a privilege to be at one of these sports schools. All right, now that's enough for me. Yeah. Somebody was going to say something a minute ago or a few minutes ago.
No, Johnny, I was going to say, so you get when you got to the Giants, right? So the basis of your program is free weights, heavy weights. Was it more, was it more of the old fashioned weightlifting bro split where you had the players doing a body part a week?
Nope. We worked the whole body every day.
So that was very obviously, we're talking 84. Nobody, correct me if I'm wrong, nobody worked out like that back then because everybody
I knew of.
Right. Everybody was doing the one body part.
I guess.
Right.
I guess. But Um, you know, you have to make your training meet the demands of the sport. So that's why you don't run miles in football.
Right.
And as far as strength and explosive strength are concerned, then if you practice every day, then you need to get used to working your body every day. Now that's simplistic, but it's true.
Right.
Yeah. Because I
You
think
know,
when you started with the Giants, they were 3-12-1, and I think they had
the year
25.
before now.
Right.
Yeah, year before I got there.
And then I guess they had 25 players on that were injured prior to. When you took over, they dropped down to 7. So whatever it's still, and also I know in other interviews, just preparing for this interview, you're saying you like the community aspect of the gym. You know, energy goes on energy. We're a lot of teams now. Everything's kind of it's big. It's like a warehouse. But like when you went to the Giants facility, what did they give you? Like, hey, we know you're the strength coach. What do you need, or did you kind of work with what they had there?
No, because Parcells acted as though any equipment I wanted to buy was coming out of his pocket, and would probably put his family on food stamps.
Yeah.
But anyway, we bought we were able to buy a bunch of weights, and what they had was just a kind of a little area in a big room, a big kind of a turf area. And the squat racks, you could put your hand on them and push and pull a little bit, and they would shimmy. I mean, I'd be scared to put any type of weight on those racks. Then the plates were not machined. First of all, they didn't have any rubber plates. They were all metal. And some of the 45s weighed as much as 54. And some of the 45s weighed as little as 36. So that's a huge difference put on different ends of the bar.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were able to, to Coach Parcells, I guess, told his family he'd get them off food stamps as quick as he could. And, we were able to buy some stuff. Yeah.
No, Johnny, again, no, it's it has to make you feel good because, like I said, we've been sticking to a Giants team. So we had Perry Williams, again, Billy Yard, Stephen Baker. And when they look back at what was the difference, what were some of the variables that made them and the team successful, your name rolled off their tongue. I mean, Perry Williams, we had him on first. And, he said, he felt just the way he trained, Billy Yard, the same thing. And, that has to make you feel good. And, the word that they used was that, you kind of revolutionized, what the Giants did. And, the proof is in the pudding. That led to a very successful run, and now you can see, obviously, Parcells, really must have thought so because he brings you to New England, as well. So, I mean, that's some quality time you got to spend all these years with Coach Parcells. So I'm sure you have a gazillion Parcells stories.
Oh, is that your way of asking to hear one?
You got to give us one. Everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. This is probably Rob Panarella's favorite. It's one of my favorites. And you're right, there are a ton of them. But when we went to New England, I think they'd won something like 8 games in 3 years. And we needed everything. And for a good many of the few talented players we had, some of them, football didn't mean enough. So they had to go. But so he was on the hunt again for every position. Well, one day he comes in the weight room. This is before the off season starts. And here's a kid that is a man mountain. Turns out he was about 6'4", 315. And coach sat him down in my office and just said, look, if you want to have any chance at all of making this team, you got to be here every day in the off season. Not some of the days, not most of the days, every day. Well, kid, yes, sir, coach. Yes, sir. Sure gonna do it. Well, he was there every day for about the first 6 or 8 weeks. And then he comes in one Friday and says, Coach, I got to run home for a minute and check on my McDonald's. And I said, we better go tell Coach Parcells. And he said, well, he's probably busy. And I said, well, he'll interrupt whatever he's doing for you. Well, and he looked at his wife. Well, Coach, I got to hurry. I might miss my plane. I said, okay. And so he never came back. The first day of camp were devoted to physicals and the conditioning test. And the conditioning test was 300-yard shuttles. The lineman had to make it in 60 seconds. So you run 50 and back, 50 and back, 50 and back, nonstop. Well, Coach Parcells and I were the only ones on the field besides the players that were running. So the bigs ran first. And I'll just keep an eye on this kid to see if, maybe he did have the discipline to get himself in shape. Well, on the first 300, he looked like Usain Bolt. Then on the next 300, they had a 2-minute rest in between. On the next 300, the first 50, flying. Second 50, Olympic sprinter. Third 50, fourth 50. On the fifth 50, he kind of stumbled a little bit as he was changing directions. And then after he changed directions, the whole population of New England jumped on his back. He just stumbled and staggered. He missed his time by over 30 seconds, and he just fell out in the end zone. Of course, the trainers and doctors were all over there ministering to him. And Parcells, now his whispers carried through 2 states now, but he yelled over there to the trainer, when he wakes up, tell him he's cut. Now, I just instantly turned to see what response that was getting from the other players. And I actually saw about 4 guys flinch because they knew there was a new sheriff in town and this dude did not play.
Right.
Yeah.
And if he says it's important to him, if he wants you to do it, you better do it. Or else the next thing they'll be asking you is wonder or aisle. So that's I think a great story.
Absolutely. You gotta set the tone.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just tell you this very quickly. He would tell the players first night of training camp that, we were, fairly good at not having injuries. And he would tell the players the first night of training camp, he'd say, look, if you're one of those guys that's always in the training room and you're always hurt and you can't practice, then I can't evaluate you. And if I can't evaluate you, I can't keep you. Now, I think that cut down on the injuries more than anything I did.
Right.
Well, I know you were quoted, though, about Phil Simms. You said at 37, he was your hardest worker. I mean, Phil Simms came in more at state, drafted number 1 by the Giants. And then just talk about his work ethic during that time. And I know you said you're quoted that speed's kind of like the first thing that you lose. And Phil Simms always wanted to kind of keep his speed, but just talk about his work ethic. And at 37, he was still pitching at it.
Okay, when I came there in '84, Phil was 29 or 30, and he hadn't been able to make it through a season due to injury. He hadn't come close to making it through a season. Well, I'd been there about a day or two, and Phil comes in, introduces himself, and he says, I want to work with you. And I just said, well, Phil, I got to confess, I hadn't had time yet to draw up a program for quarterbacks, but I'll stay up all night tonight and do one and have it ready for you tomorrow. He said, no, don't do that. I want to do what everybody else does. Well, he did. He did the same things, not as heavy as he wasn't as strong, but the same thing the lineman did. And then when the training camp rolled around, we backed off on the work. Everybody didn't stop working. We just didn't do as much. And Phil said, I don't want to do that. You make me an off-season program to do during training camp. And then the same thing during the season. I want to get stronger. I can tell this is helping me. So every year he was a brutally hard worker in the off season, a brutally hard worker during training camp, and just a killer worker during the season. And I'll say this about Speed, though he didn't have a lot to lose. And Parcells told him one time, he said, Sims, you could, he said, Sims, you couldn't run out of sight in a day. Oh, me. Anyway, Sims had to put up with a lot from Parcells, but it was a love-hate relationship.
Do you still talk to some of the former players? I mean, you still have
I do. I do.
Do you still talk to Parcells too, or no?
To Phil, I hadn't talked to Phil in a minute. Talked to Brad Benson. As a matter of fact, he called last night. I talked to Maurice Carthen and Curtis McGriff. Mark Collins, Kenny Hill. I hadn't talked to Kenny in a minute, but a fair number of them.
And I know, like the state of the game today, you're saying like a lot of the offensive linemen, they don't wear pads, and then you're saying that or development, you need pads. And I guess what's your comparison of what teams are doing wrong today compared to what you guys did?
Well, first of all, Parcells would tell the team for the season, if you don't wear hip pads and you get hit on a spot that a hip pad would cover and you have to miss a game, I'm fining you a game check. So that was a little inducement right there.
Yeah.
And then the offensive linemen had to wear knee braces. They didn't have any choice and no voice. Had to wear knee braces.
That's Johnny. That's interesting because I remember. I don't want to scare Giant fans now, but when Joe Judge became the head coach of the Giants, he made them wear knee braces, and he said, now you talk about the connection here, he said that he got that from Alabama. So I think we could trace that from Saban to back to Belichick, back to Parcells, back to you. But I remember, you're only talking a few years ago. Dable's only been the coach now 3 years. Joe Judge's first big thing, he goes, all the offensive linemen, wear knee braces, and he gave Saban the credit. But I mean, again, that goes directly back to you. We know that tree, very well. Parcells to Belichick to Saban. But and it's amazing now because now we're talking we're in 2024. So 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 2018, 2019, whatever. Something that you instituted. How many years ago that was still being done.
Well, I see players with their pants cut off 6 inches above their knee.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Well, they don't tackle very well. I'll say that. Our teams usually tackle real well. And yet we never in practice or training camp or anything, never took anybody to the ground tackling. But we worked on form tackling every single day and all through the season. I mean, I don't care if it's the week of the Super Bowl, we're working on form tackling.
Well, again, that's now we can get into another area. I mean, you talk about this. I think that's the state of sports in general now is how much, fundamentals. Where are the fundamentals at any level? I mean, you look at the NBA, right? How many basketball players are bad at free throw shooting? How much time are you putting into that? How bad is defending in basketball, nowadays compared to back then? Back then you worked on footwork. Again, now everybody just wants to dunk a basketball and run back and, let the other team score so they can get the ball back quicker to dunk the basketball again. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I don't watch the NBA, but the last years that I watched it, that's kind of what I saw coming.
Right.
This might be interesting to you. If it isn't, just stop me midstream here. But a big thing you hear now is recovery, and the term that I hate, keeping them fresh. Now, so a lot of coaches, what that means is we're going to take the pads off, and we won't be out in pads. But since we're not in hitting, we'll have a lot of teaching on the field. We'll make practice longer, and there's a lot of standing around, which makes you mentally tired, which makes you physically tired. I don't know the difference between mentally tired and physically tired. To me, they're one and the same. And when there's a lot of standing around, that's what you get. And the strength coaches, that means later in the season, we're going to back off on the weights. Well, Coach Parcells he wouldn't tell the players this, but he would shorten practice. If he saw a period that was going good, he'd blow his whistle, go on to the next period. And sometimes we get so far ahead of schedule, coaches would be searching on their practice schedule, see where we were in the schedule. And a lot of times from stretch to last whistle to be about an hour and 30 minutes later in the season. And then instead of backing off on the weights, we went heavier. We didn't do as many repetitions in a workout total, but we went heavier. So that seemed to work out pretty good. We were in 8 championship games and won 7 of them.
Yeah.
And so, and we were always better at the end of the season than we were at the beginning. So I think
yeah, absolutely. Now you look at it, right? We had this conversation with Bill Ard. We had this conversation with Stephen Baker. We actually got into it in pretty good length and detail with Stephen Baker. Stephen Baker's, we were talking, the month of September in the NFL now is like an extension of preseason. How many guys are ready to go week 1? How many injuries occur the first few weeks? But again, that's the shortened preseason. That's the shortened amount of time, players could be on the field in pads, as so on and so forth.
Well, too, they have just about taken away the all-season program.
Right.
My first 2 years with the Giants, we had 21 weeks. Then it went to 16. And then I think in New England, by agreement with the NFLPA, it was down to 13. Well, you can help a player a lot more in 21 weeks than you can in 13.
Yeah.
Right.
That's 2 whole months of training you miss. So, anyway, I think all of those things contributed to injuries, and plus poor fundamentals.
Yeah. And then I know, Johnny, you said also too, like the strength and conditioning coach. I guess you were born in with the players. Now a lot of them have their own guys on their off season, so it's almost like a conflict. So what's your take on some of these players getting their own people, not being associated with the team?
Worse than that, some of them are allowed to bring their own guys into the facility.
Yeah.
And sit in the weight room. And I wasn't gonna have that. I just wasn't gonna happen. But nobody ever mentioned that idea to me about bringing a guy in. But anyway, here's the thing about your own guru is he can't push you too hard because you're paying him and you might quit if you make it too hard. And these guys, you get paid to work out at your facility in off season. But if you got your guru, you have to pay him. So he has to convince you that what your strength coach at your team is doing is outmoded, out of date, and that his way is a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the state of the profession right now. And, it's not as hard. Chances are it won't be as productive working with a guru. And, and the guru, he advertises to get more players. He advertises that he's got you. Well, if you get hurt during the season, well, I had him ready. His own strength coach messed him up there at the team.
Yeah.
So they can't be wrong no matter what. If they do good during the season, hey, look what I did with this guy. You ought to come work with me. If I did that for him, look, just think what I can do for you.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's it's and like you said, it's become a big business.
Oh,
and
sure.
money drives the industry. And probably a part of it is, that's a way for these guys to also justify being away from the facility. Oh, I'm working out I'm on the New York Giants. I'm working out with my guy in Florida, or I'm working out in Arizona.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you don't want to be here, in the cold weather, in the early part of spring or whatever before mini camp. But
You're exactly right. Exactly right. I know this. I can't remember. I don't know if it's his first year, second year, or whatever year with the Jets. Charlie Weiss, the first day of the offseason, had to come in and report to Coach Parcells about who was there and was anybody not there. And he said, well, the only one not here was Keyshawn Johnson. And then Parcells said, where is he? He said, well, he's back in L.A. And he said, I'm going to leave out a couple of adjectives here, but call the blankety blank and tell him to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And at 8 o'clock the next morning, Keyshawn was right there. Took, I guess, a red eye from L.A. or something, but he was there. So,
did he have an excuse?
So when you got a support like that, it's hard not to do a pretty good job.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true.
Right.
Yeah, and I know, like, going back, you moved, you're on the Patriots. The Patriots made the Super Bowl in '97. You got a ring with the Tampa. Did you have a relationship with Gruden? Because I think Gruden was in the ball boy.
Very bad one.
Yeah.
He was the worst coach that I ever worked for by far.
No kidding. How so? You got to expand on that a little bit.
One, no support from him.
Yeah.
Two, you see him yelling and screaming and making all these things, but they don't yell at guys that he thinks won't take it. He'll only yell at the second teamers or guys that, that he knows will put up with it. He never did anything with the defense. He was offensive coordinator that also made the final decisions.
Yeah.
So, I know Coach Parcells would have never done that. Never. He was going to have his hands on all facets.
Yeah. And then I think you said, you quoted, we talked about you were Tampa in another interview. You said, good players need to be good guys. And then you said in Tampa, you didn't really have that many good guys. So you can explain.
Well, we had a
bunch.
Mike Allstott and Rondé Barber and John Mitch, Derek Brooks. They were all good guys, but there's some that I won't name that were bad guys. And now Tampa tried to hire Coach Parcells about 4 times, and I would have been part of those each time. And one of those times he called me and we were talking, and he said, now he named the player's name. We're going to give him about a month to get on board. And if he doesn't, he's going. Well, you think, well, wait a minute, how are you going to get rid of a Hall of Fame player or a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame? How do you get rid of a guy like that? I'm telling you, you're better off without guys like that. I don't care how many sacks or touchdowns, whatever. I don't care about the stats. This guy didn't care about the team. He didn't care about winning. He didn't care about anything except his own stats. And rude to other people, just bad guy. Bad guy. And he wouldn't have been there with Coach Parcells, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Coach Gruden, but, you look at the body of his career, everybody says 2 things. He won the Super Bowl with Tony Dungy's players, number 1. And number 2, he had the late, great, who passed away recently, Monty Kiffin calling the defense. So,
Yep.
I'm not looking for you to trample on Coach Gruden, but I'm just saying, it goes to show you, right? Like some people maybe to be a little bit more humble, at the end of the day, it does pay to really be a little bit nicer in certain circumstances, because again, Coach Gruden, as you know, inherited a very healthy roster. Tony Dungy did a very good job of rebuilding the Bucks. He just couldn't get them, to the show, if you will. And ultimately, Coach Gruden did that with a very big hand from, Monty Kiffin, which is why he's in Tampa Bay's Ring of Honor. So, I mean, it's interesting that, we're reflecting back on, on those years. And also, too, let's not forget, as you know, you guys did beat his previous team, who allegedly kept a lot of the things that he had in place scheme-wise. So, there was always that rumor that during that Super Bowl that, Tampa knew what was coming, what the Raiders were running. But,
I mean, there was no skullduggery there or anything. I really like Monty, and we used to kid each other relentlessly. And we'd do it during the team stretch. And, as long as the players were stretching, doing what I told them to do, it's okay if there was some kidding around and stuff. Anyway, Monty was on me about something one day, and I just said, Monty, you are perfect two. You got 2 feet, 2 hands, 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 hairs, and 2 teeth. The players just fell out, and all Monty could do was kind of cuss back at me. That was my shot on Monty. But we did stuff like that all the time. He was fun.
Yeah. Well, listen, John, I can't thank you enough for the time. I really appreciate it. But I know you reached out to me. It was an honor and privilege to speak to us. It's an honor and privilege to speak to you. I usually finish with something, and Jerry kind of closes each episode out. But, as far as your time in San Francisco, you conversing with Mike Gruden, or John Gruden, sorry, Mike Nolan, you really took a liking to. And then with that, like, what are you doing now to kind of stay busy? I know you're kind of semi-retired, but what do you just talk a little bit about Nolan.
Listen,
and what are you doing now?
I'm the poster child for retirement, but and I'm looking for ways to be more retired. But there are some coaches that call, and we just want to. Sometimes they just want to vent. Sometimes they got questions. Sometimes they just want to discuss what's going on in their environment. So I kind of stay pretty busy not pretty busy, but some busy with that. That's the main thing. And then I've been blessed with a lot of really, really good friends. They say if you have 4 or 5 true friends, you're lucky. Well, I know I've got at least 13, and there's another one that I think I should add to the list.
Yeah.
So I've just been blessed with having a lot of wonderful people in my life.
Yeah, and then I think they also said too, like, you're probably the first sports psychologist, even though you're working out in the gym, you're probably one of the first psychologists, because I guess you treated the kids that you coached in high school, college, and professional ranks all the same. You wanted them to do their best. It didn't matter if they were a starter, it didn't matter if they were last person on the team. You all wanted to do that. So I mean, but thanks, Coach, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. But thanks a lot to Jerry.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Johnny, listen, it's Jimmy and I, on a personal note, are big Giant fans. And again, this has been these last few episodes for us, to have Perry, Billy Ard on, and Stephen Baker, and now you. It really gets us back to our childhood and those great 1980 New York Giant teams. So again, from a personal standpoint, you were a very big part of those Super Bowls. The players said it. We as fans, want to thank you, for your time. Again, we have Johnny Parker, Hall of Famer in the Strength and Conditioning Hall of Famer, the legendary strength and conditioning coach. Bill Parcells, his eyes and ears in multiple NFL organizations. And Johnny, like I said, it was a pleasure to have you. God bless you. And, hopefully we'll talk to you soon. And this will conclude another great episode. Join us next time Hopefully the next time that you join us, we are still talking Yankee baseball, and maybe the Giants could score more than one touchdown in a game. But anyway, Johnny, all the best, and thanks again. We'll talk to you soon, everyone.
Listen, I got your number. So I know you put your number out. Anybody who's interested,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. You mind just telling it to whoever's listening if they want to reach out to you?
727-415-8236. Call anytime for any reason.
And then they can find you on Facebook too. I know you're not a social media guy, but that's where I found you on Facebook. But Johnny,
yeah. And I steal a lot of stuff and post it on Facebook, and I think some of it's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, listen, John, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for agreeing to this episode, and thanks for the memories. But we'll keep in touch and stay healthy. And then thanks for changing the game. And really, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless you, my friends.
All right.
Take care, Johnny. All the best. Thank you.